Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful sunny spring day. I really appreciate you taking the time, and my name is Marianne Zarzana. I'm the Director of Creative Writing here, Assistant Professor of English. And first I want to thank Dr. John Ginocchio for organizing the 8th Annual Fine Arts Celebration. The English department has been part of this event since its inception by Dean Jan Loft when she was chair of the Fine Arts and Communications Department. And now I will begin by introducing my husband, Jim Zarzana. Jim has been teaching at SMSU for nearly 25 years. During 18 of those years, he's been working on his speculative sci-fi work, The Mars Code Saga. The Mars Code Dissident, Book 1 of the saga, is available now for Kindle downloads, but will be available in print later this summer. Besides fiction, he occasionally writes poems and essays, as you will hear today. Last fall, Yang Mei Ui, a writer in London who is a friend of ours, asked us to each write an essay for her Story Guru website about what it was like to be writing partners as well as life partners, husband and wife, for over 30 years. We decided to write our essays without discussing them ahead of time. When we shared them, we were pleased to see how they dovetailed with one another. Yang Mei posted them on her Story Guru website last November. We enjoyed writing those essays and reflecting on the challenges and joys of sharing a writing life. Here is Jim's take.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, and thank you for coming. As I said, if you came in late, once I change glasses, I can't see you, but I can see this. So I'm going to start with my guest blog post called A Shared Writing Life. We met inauspiciously in a parking lot on an April afternoon, a glorious, sunny, early spring day, as I recall. I parked, looked around for a clue as to where Regina Hall Chapel was, and watched as this snappy yellow car pulled up next to me. Snappy Yellow opened, a lithe, young, auburn-headed woman stood next to me. It had that rendezvous with destiny feel to it. As we started walking and talking, the redhead interrogated me. Was I a professor? No. Graduate student, now just beyond comprehensive exams, on to my dissertation. Area? English Lit, specifically the novel. Did I know Professor XYZ? Yes. She didn't let much slip about herself, except for she'd already finished her BA in English, had been away for 2 years, and was now back working for the university. Then she was gone from my side, in search, she admitted later, for a guitar-playing young man tuning up in the chapel. But the bricks of our paths were set that day. Literature and writing consumed our separate lives up to that time, and they have been linking us ever since. At the time, I was earning a PhD in English literature, vaguely hoping to land a teaching job back in California. I'd entered the University of Notre Dame a few years earlier, a bit older than fellow students, having already finished an MA in my native California and taught high school there for 4 years. Marianne was among the first class of women to graduate from Notre Dame, and upon graduating, she immediately set off for Colorado to work as a journalist for 2 years. Notre Dame was her second time around. Her second time around, was a planned summer stop on her way from Colorado to Washington, D.C., where she anticipated working as a writer for a social justice nonprofit. That summer, stopover became a full-time job on campus that had now stretched into a year. And we've kept at the writing. I finished my degree, landed a sabbatical replacement near Notre Dame, and then out east, that went bust, and eventually we ended up on the Minnesota prairie. Not the 10,000 lakes bit, but the part that looks like Iowa, flat and windy. But here, our writing lives took off. Marianne kept at her journalism and PR writing, opening a freelance business from home while our daughter was young. Eventually, she was writing professionally half-time at Southwest Minnesota State University, grants, recruitment material, press releases. But over time, she desired to write her own poetry and delve into the works of fellow poets and writers. The art of writing itself held sway. She wanted to write and teach full time. I started a short project nearly 18 years ago, a novel I could write on a half-year sabbatical. It grew into a 4-volume set of dystopian speculative fiction, the Marsko Saga. This past summer, I launched the first novel, The Marsko Dissident, via Amazon for e-download. It will be in print this summer. While in my teaching writing phase, Marianne decided to earn her MFA in poetry. So for 4 years, she went over to Minnesota State Mankato and worked as a poet, teacher, and grad student. I taught overloads and worked summer school. But somehow it all worked and continues to work. There's not much of each other's work we don't read. She proofed my dissertation years and years ago. I read her MA thesis, a collection of poems titled Flyover Country. She's read my novels and blogs, and I've read her poems and her blogs before they're online. While I was department chair, she even read my yearly reports to the dean, an onerous task. So here we are, a poet and a novelist, 2 professors in the same department, parents of an aspiring writer, owner of too many books, writers of too many outlines and plans for other works, more novels, screenplays, essays, travelogues. They all await. I'm sure as we sort those out and get them on paper, we'll remain our first and often most critical readers. Being a writer and living with a fellow writer makes for an unusual synergy. First, it's fortunate that we are not in the same genre. We're never competing for an idea or a character. Keep your greasy fingers off my Elizabeth Bennet-esque ingenue. And when we offer advice, it's a novelist, it's a novelist making suggestions to a poet. Likewise, my characters have to pass her authenticity test. Do they seem real enough for a poet to feel interested in them, to invite them to dinner, read them one of her latest poems? And as I say of her quite often, she's not the sort of partner who stands behind me as I write and whines, "If you didn't write all the time, you could paint the bathroom." Let the paint peel. We have another chapter to write and a poem to finish. Thank you. Marianne Murphy Zarzana, as you all know, teaches writing and serves as the Director of Creative Writing here at SMSU. She loves writing poems and essays, reading, traveling, practicing yoga, spending time with family and friends. Currently, she's working on a film project about Sister Jean Lenz, a pioneering leader who, with Father Ted Hesburgh, President Emeritus of the University of Notre Dame, transformed Notre Dame from an all-male bastion, which it had been for over 130 years, into a co-ed institution. Give you Marianne. She's going to start with her blog. Oh, I better switch out here.
Thank you very much, Jim. Okay, and the blog that I wrote for Story Guru is called The Writing Partner's Honey-Do List. In his book, The Lie That Tells the Truth, John Dufresne shares his 10 commandments of writing fiction. The third commandment, remember to keep holy your writing time. For 30-plus years, my husband Jim and I, both writers, have aided each other in following this commandment. By doing so, we've created fiction, nonfiction, and poetry while juggling careers, family, everyday distractions, and extraordinary mayhem such as a flooded basement. Some of my neighbors are right here. As the man of the house, Jim doesn't claim to be Johnny on the spot or Mr. Fix-It, and I don't expect him to play those stereotypical male roles. Urban Dictionary defines honeydew list, a pun on honeydew, the fruit, as chores assigned by one's primary companion or sweetheart. They give an example. Nah, dude, I can't. I got a honeydew list long enough to keep me home for the whole summer and into deer hunting season. That does not describe the length of Jim's honeydew list. Yes, he's handy after growing up with 3 brothers and having worked at a summer camp. But to make time for writing, we hire professionals to trim trees and bushes, clear snow off our long driveway, and paint walls. In the meantime, Jim's busy upstairs in his office at his writing desk, following Dufresne's first commandment of writing fiction: sit your ass in the chair. No one else could have written The Mars Codissident, the first book in Jim's 4-book series, The Mars Saga, which he published last summer on Amazon as an ebook. As the woman of the house, I do not aim to be Martha Stewart or Mary Poppins. And Jim doesn't expect me to be a paragon of female domesticity. I love sewing Halloween costumes for our daughter Elaine, creating Big Bird and Care Bear birthday cakes, planting gardens of basil and tomatoes. But the Merry Maids keep our home spruced up, and an array of folks help with sewing alterations, weeding, raking, and so on. No one else could have penned my poems or essays. When we returned from our honeymoon in Toronto in 1983, we drove to Lake Wawasee in northern Indiana to gather with relatives at a rented cottage. Out on a pontoon boat, we cruised around the lake. Jim pointed out a Cape Cod-style cottage with 2 second-floor windows facing the lake. Marianne, I can picture us in that one, each of us with our own writing studio and a view of the water. Do it, just do it, chimed in my Uncle Tom. We may not have a lake view, but we do each have a room of our own where we tap away on our computers, read books, do research. We also critique and proofread each other's work, read endless revisions, and cheer each other on at readings. Instead of the typical honey-do list, here's the writing partner's honey-do list that Jim and I keep mentally as writers who are also life mates. Number 1, honey, do listen to me about my latest writing project. Number 2, honey, do give me the time and space to write, even when it's inconvenient and chores are calling. Number 3, honey, do celebrate my acceptances. Number 4, honey, do celebrate my inevitable rejections. They show I'm legit, that I'm in the arena, having the courage to put my work out there. Number 5, and finally, honey, do remind me that each step on the writing path is worthwhile, even though some days are more soul-crushing than I ever could have imagined. What about the darker side of 2 writers living together? The competition. If anything, we spurred each other on, like athletes on the same team, each intent on helping the other achieve their personal best. After I started a writing blog, Flyover Country, Jim started his own blog. When we attend writing conferences together, we often divide and conquer, attend different readings and panels, then share the wealth at the day's end. Bottom line, as writers, if we're not writing, we're probably going to be crabby. A happy spouse and writing partner is much more fun to be around. Last fall, over 100 people filled the seats when Jim gave a reading from the Mars Codissident here. As the SMSU Director of Creative Writing, I was thrilled to introduce him. Here's the man who encouraged me when I decided midlife to earn a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. While I commuted 2 hours across the prairie to Minnesota State University in Mankato over 3 years, Jim cooked dinners for our daughter, who was in high school, helped her with homework, and walked our dogs. Without his support, I would not have been able to earn my MFA, work as a teaching assistant, graduate, and get hired for my dream job here at SMSU. When I first considered getting my MFA, people asked if I was going to get a low residency MFA degree, figuring that made the most sense since our daughter was still at home. But I wanted to know if I had the chops to be a teacher. The only way to find out? Get in the classroom and teach. The summer after my second year in grad school, at my Notre Dame reunion, I won a trip for 2 to Hawaii. Jim and I had been planning to splurge for our 20th wedding anniversary that July, even though our budget was tight, on a getaway weekend to the Twin Cities, 3 hours away. When I called Jim back in Minnesota to tell him the good news, he did not believe me. But Jim, I really did win a trip for two to Hawaii. And we need this. It's going to be our rocket fuel to keep us going during my last year of grad school. 1 month later, on the beach in Maui, I pored over books to prep for my MFA comprehensive exams in the fall. Walking on the beach that evening, Jim and I looked up, astonished at the sight of a night rainbow arching across the moonlit sky. Add one more item to the writing partner's honey-do list. Number 6. Honey, do know when words, written or spoken, are no longer necessary. And now we're going to go back to Jim.
I'm not sure how long, I have a piece of Marsco, it's pretty short, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take. So I do have a few poems which I want to get to if I don't go too long on the Marsco. For those of you that don't know, Marsco is a futuristic corporation that ends up ruling the world after the Supreme Court last week. Not so far-fetched, right? I didn't bring my cover. The important thing to remember is they are, first and foremost, a computer company, and they rule the world by controlling who uses computers. And they do this by implanting disks, little microchips under your fingers that allow you to run the computers. And the more chips you have, the more power you have in the computer world. This is a world where there are colonies on the moon. It's on Earth. There's colonies on the moon and Mars and the asteroid belt. There are 3 levels of people. Associates, those are people in Marsco. SIDS, or members of subsidiaries, and they'd be roughly like middle-class people. They do things that Marsco doesn't want to do when they're relatively comfortable, but they basically are tied to the hip of Marsco. And most of the world is PRIMS. And I'll make you buy and read the book to figure out what PRIMS means. It's an acronym. But PRIMS are just the worst. They're just thrown out. They're the cast-off citizens. They're most of the world. Where an associate and a few SIDS would have finger disks, a PRIM has a PRIM disk, which is basically an RFID. Those things really exist. Fortunately, they're not planting them in people. But like your UPS packages have one, and Walmart uses them to track their trucks. It's basically, I think we're going to put them on airplanes pretty soon, too, after last week, a month ago. But anyway, PRIMs are tracked, and they have a disk back here. And if they are no longer a PRIM, they've got a scar where they've removed the disk, okay? The character I'm reading about, Mei Ling Chen, has been accused of a crime in Marsco, and she's kind of left in Marsco but not really active. And she'd been an astronaut, and she has decided she's going to try to escape Marsco. In order to do that, she feels that she has to have a gun, which is called an Enfield, and she's looking for a clone, one that doesn't need finger discs, but it's a very sophisticated gun, okay, handgun. That's what she's looking for. So she's gone up to Vancouver, where she's going to try to buy this thing. It was nearly 10 when she left her hotel in a jitney, heading towards a large park. From there, she walked along a busy street. Half an hour later, she doubled back on herself to make sure she wasn't followed, then set off in earnest. It didn't take her long. Down a cul-de-sac near another small park, dozens of stores bustled with SID customers. At the corner, an ice cream and candy shop invited the locals in. Along the blind street, dozens of small establishments offered this and that, hard to find, one of a kind. The sidewalk, patched but still in good shape, met a set of brick steps going up the light rail embankment that closed off the road. At the far end, in what had been a turning circle, a large hovercraft, once Marsco, now SID-owned, hovered, set down, unloaded, then rose skyward. All signs of normalcy. Her target was hidden in plain sight. The door's lettering was neat and succinct. Alves Leather Goods. As she entered, a buzzer alerted those in the back. No one was visible. Inside the small shop, half the size of her father's, Chen was met with a row of coats and handbags at the front and belts and heavy work aprons at the back. All the goods were designed for practicality and use, nothing like Al Sr. last night. All the displays were jammed in. No mannequins were graced with skirts or leather jackets. It was a practical indie establishment with no embellishments to induce associates to purchase merchandise. Next to the door, a simple printed sign read, "Everything handmade by Sid Labor." "Yes?" a voice asked from a second room attached to the front showroom by an arch. The man still didn't show himself. "I'm looking for a jacket," was all Chen gave away. "Leather?" "Of course. And handmade by Sid Labor." The voice didn't respond and obviously didn't have a sense of humor. Chen added, "I have ready tokens." A lanky young man stepped forward. He wore his own handiwork, a visor, not so much to protect his eyes than to hold back his long, tawny hair. Over a tie-dyed shirt, he had a tooled vest with rivets holding down strips of leather. He looked every inch an indie, with no time for anyone or anything Marsco. Chen took a hard look at the lettering on his visor. "Live free or die." "What century do you inhabit?" the associate cynically asked herself. Meanwhile, from a third room at the back, a large man joined them by stepping through a beaded curtain. He looked like a humongous prim of Asian or Polynesian, with Asian or Polynesian features, wearing a mullet. His hair in front was bleached platinum blonde, while at the back it hung down beyond his shoulders, jet black like Chen's. His girth was 3 times the size of his comrades'. He also had on a tie-dye, but his gut was visible, his navel open like a second mouth demanding to be fed. He wore a pair of dark glasses as though he had just stepped out from bright sunshine. From the storefront's third room, Chen heard sitar music and muffled voices, probably women and children. As she came through the arch, the odor of leather gave way to the heavy scent of incense. The associate had never seen such a defiant pair, acting as though divestiture in the wars hadn't happened, as though Marsco wasn't somewhere just around the corner. But she was counting on that defiance, if they would trust her. Before she spoke, Humongo stated, "She's clean. No weapons, nothing but discs." So they're assuming I'm Marsco, she realized, and using a pretty damn sophisticated scan system. Neither man moved or changed his blank expression. "Look, you're either selling goods here or not. Either way, what if?" "I've ready tokens." She motioned to a small purse at her side. "It's still, what if?" "Look, guys, if I were security, I'd be armed and you'd be splattered. Troopers don't ask questions of prats like you." She had never served in security, but she knew their routine. "Tell us," the fat one said, with his eyes hidden, both his mouths expressionless. "The days of evidence, of trial—" "Oh, you're too young," she shrugged. "You don't remember all that." "Shit," the little one spit out. "You here to bullshit or what?" He let his eyes dart to his companion. They shared a grin. "Not a chance, runt," Chen reassured her. "It's tokens only with you two. Not buying anything like that. Not from you." Since you're being blunt," she said, "I'll be blunt. I hear you sell lethals, clones probably. But I'll take one, my preface for a 9mm. Their grins switched back to blankness. The fat one started to move, but the runt held his arm. "Look, bitch, I ain't selling that shit. Marsco's got regulations." She cut him off. "And mean-ass dogs for troopers," Chen shot, playing their game, "that'll eat your guts just as soon as piss on you. As if you ain't. If I am, your Boney and his fat ass would be fried in a nano. Those in the next room, too." The men leaned that way, protective of those hidden behind. "Now we can play these I'm buffer than your mother's ass games, or you can sell me what I need." Neither moved. "Look, Holes, if I walk without, security'll be busting in here so damn fast you won't know what the fuck hit you." Perhaps too truthful, the bony one let down a bit. "Oh, I know. Security Seen it happen. His head moved over Chen's shoulder to the cul-de-sac, just out there. Sid's life's fine, she argued, not pleading, just pointing out the obvious. Imagine getting caught up in a lander sweep. Being made a prim is never pretty. The slender one inadvertently looked at the back of his scar-free left hand. Nothing was guaranteed in his world, not even that. His status could change in a blink. He knew it. The Sids glanced at each other once more. What's your assurance no trooper will come after? You'll have the goods on me. It's mutual trust or mutual destruction. How fucking retro, the skinny one unfortunately noted. A teenager holding a baby came through the beaded curtain. She looked so-am or possibly med. How like Marsco, Chen thought. Lots of continental rep here. The baby seemed to be the skinny one's. From under the red bandana, the girl's black hair fell down to her waist. Her skirt was panels of denim alternated with leather, a particular style several generations ago. She hissed something to the young man, something the young man understood, but Chen didn't. She says she wants you out of here. Fine, sell me that clone and I'll be gone. No one moved. Distrust in the room was palpable. Finally, Chen made up her mind. Don't worry about security, she softened. They've given up watching me. She handed a 10 token to the reluctant young woman. Here, it's okay, for the child. Mei Ling explained. Troopers threw Sten grenades, not tokens, the girl knew. She whispered to Alves Jr. a second time. You sure? He answered back softly in English, this time. As the door buzzer sounded, he yelled at the disappearing associate. Wait! In a boarded-up storefront next door, the two Sids opened a plastic storage tub marked discards. Under some clean rags and tooled scraps, the leather maker showed the assistant 6 clone sidearms. 4 were smaller, 7.6 millimeter models, easy to conceal. He urged her to try one of those. It'll fit your hand nice, he noted. Never one to accept limits, Chen took up 1.29 millimeters, the black matte model. Then she took up the nickel piece, holding it in her right hand, then switching, weighing them both, feeling their grips as she aimed off into the distance at no particular target. Disc locked? Lever safety switch, Alves explained. All the usual lasers for targeting, but no discs necessary. That, like a standard issue without twitching, Chen concluded under her breath. Plus, the Humongo one added, without discs, it's free from tracing. All the advantages of a Marsco weapon, none of the disadvantages, the young man stated, in a voice and manner quite similar to his respectable father. Clip? Usual 20 of the 9 millimeter. Aerosol supply holds at least 100 shots. Chen tripped the charger. A low hissing sound came from the grip as the firing chamber filled. The weapon pinged to acknowledge no projectiles were in it. 3 bursts? Or single shot, yes, just like any Marsco model, the larger man replied, just like a sales rep eager to move his goods along. A 4-burst model came out last year, the other one stated knowledgeably, but they still tend to jam. It was news to Chen, although she took the information in without changing her expression. My supplier hasn't worked out the kinks as yet. As you can imagine, can't openly experiment with them. The associate was pleased with the black clone. She would have picked it out from among many. But to ask questions about its origin would only raise more suspicions that she was with security. Instead, she asked if she could try it out. Can't near here. You'll have to trust me, it works. The pair were locked in that vicious cycle once more because there was no way to test the weapon. Finally, Chen asked the second question, how much? 225, but that'll give you 2 propellant cylinders. I'll put in a fresh one, and 100 heads and clips. Not exactly an arsenal, but more than enough for protection. The fat one spoke again. Jacket? Well, that was a dodge, Chen smiled, still coming to know the weapon as hers. No, he means we'll also sell you a holster. The holster was a leather jacket with a hidden pocket under the left arm for the clone. slips into the pouch that's lined to deaden any surveillance scans. If you'll walk as if, his shrug let her know the sense. He had 3 in her size, tan black or seal brown. Leather's quite supple, webbing sewn under the lining so as to ride smooth, no tugging, bunching, or sagging. It might hang on the rack alongside his father's goods and be right at home. He spoke with familiar pride about his product. The young man may have bought that clone, but he made the garment himself, working out the details of hiding the concealing holster within it. This attribute held true when he hand-stitched some lining at the left wrist that hung wrong, slipping on a sewing thimble and bending to see the details in the shop's light. He looked more and more like his father at work. Chen noticed that his hands were brown, had brown stains from curing leather, but he had no primdis scar. A toddler came and stood next to him, admiring his father's delicate close work. He tapped the boy's head gently. Delighted, the boy turned to Mei Ling and grinned with happiness. Chen went down on a knee and opened her arms. "May I?" the associate asked the mother. The child didn't know which way to turn, back towards her parents and sibling or into the arms of the stranger. His mother urged him in whispers Chen didn't understand. Slowly, the boy moved towards the waiting woman. "It's okay," he assured him. "I won't bite." The reluctant boy finally changed his shy ways and jumped into the associate with open arms. "Pick 'em up," he said in a sing-song way. His parents smiled as his father explained. "He thinks pick 'em up is a command we have to obey." Chen rose with the boy, humming and dancing a few steps while he giggled. In the end, he nestled his head into her neck, his arms around hers. She stopped abruptly when the thought hit her. Might have been ours had Julio and I lived in another world, in another time. In the end, the tanner cut the label off the jacket. This final act made sure Al's leather goods remained invisible, impossible to trace. Okay, that's that. I hope it's not too disjointed for you. Do I have time for a poem? Or okay, we'll do one poem. I promised you that I've read this before. It's called At the Flanders Field Museum, Ypres, May 2010. And the reason I chose this one is, of course, later this month we're going to start the 5-year cycle of commemorating World War I. And I have a lot of interest in World War I. And we were with a group of students at this museum in Ypres and on a global cluster. And this kind of describes the incident. And it starts with an epigraph from Philip Larkin in his poem called 1914. "Never such innocence again," is his line. The boys rushed in, a coachload of 20-odd German teens. But they might have been American or British, French or even Japanese, not remembering Verdun, the Canal, Shiloh, Waterloo, the Somme, believing in the same glory those callow recruits at Longuemarck did. Boys, excited, giddy at an old machine gun and trench mortar, goofing around with the gas mask exhibit, playing soldiers, waiting to go over the top, fingering a bayonet, a Mills bomb, an empty chlorine cylinder dubbed the Accessory by Royal Engineers. One sat behind a Crump machine gun and did air guitar actions with the 303 weapon across the pasture at a line of khaki moving along the horizon, crumpling up each young Tommy in his turn. How like the innocents their great-great-grandfathers were, triumph and victory only a frenzied advance away through the mud and wire, gas and fire, then the tattering tat-tat of a British Vickers and the musketry of Enfields with precision drilled, heard above the whine of a French 75, and down they all fell to become part of this very spot, this muddy hell. Okay, thank you. Did I introduce you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll just sit down, get out of your way. Here she is.
Thank you, Jim. And remember to buy his book, The Mars Codissident, on Amazon Kindle. I'm going to start with a poem about one of my colleagues and friends, Susan McLean. She's on sabbatical this year, and this is a poem that I wrote for her last year that proves very true of this spring as well. It's called Found Poet for Susan McLean. Only monumental news or weather events draw Twin Cities reporters 3 hours away to our corner of the prairie in southwest Minnesota. Stopping by Marshall on a snowy evening, April 10, the KARE 11 TV guy, trolling the town's empty streets, spotted our friend Susan shoveling. He must have been relieved to find someone to interview for his live feed. But when he discovered she was an English professor and a poet, did he sense he'd struck gold? So, Professor, what do you got? Urging her to go beyond April showers bring May flowers, to tell it like it really is. The found poet quoted T.S. Eliot, April is the cruelest month. And the TV guy replied, "Ooh, she's good." But why didn't he ask her for more? This poet who memorizes her poems, turning the nightly news into a reading, feeding us so hungry deeply. But watching even this snippet of Susan on our TVs, iPhones, and screens lifted us all a little. Her colleagues, friends, and students enduring an April more cruel than we could have imagined, more blindingly white, even as the crabapple tree in our front yard becomes ablaze with robins, hard at the business of gleaning berries off bare branches, noisy with the news of imminent, inevitable, oh please, spring. And this poem is about something we're all familiar with, gossip. How to mainline the drama we crave. Do not stir the pot at work or drop little cherry bombs of gossip about why he slammed the door or what she did last night. Do not pass on misinformation, assumptions, hearsay, thearsay, but instead squelch rumors the way I once squished cockroaches in that first casita I rented. Or better yet, set out little roach motels in your mind where toxic stories about other people's lives can check in but cannot check out. But what is the quickest, cheapest way to mainline the drama we all crave, to feed our cramped lives that want to expand? You already know. Read a good story. Better yet, write one. Or best, become one. This is about instances that we all find if we travel at all, where we are wanting to go somewhere and we get thrown a curveball. This is called Distressed Traveler. And there's an epigraph, Distressed Traveler Rate. Airlines contract hotel rooms for stranded travelers, offering discount overnight rates at hotels near the airport. Are you a distressed traveler? Asked the man loading my luggage onto the La Quinta Hotel shuttle van one crisp morning in Minneapolis. His question, probing, overly intimate, arrives before I'm fully awake. Do I look distressed? Unable to cope with the rigors of travel? No, not this particular morning, flying out to visit a sister in Indianapolis. But yes, I have been a distressed traveler, stranded far from my intended destination, no clue about my estimated time of departure, dog paddling in a sea of unfamiliar faces. So now I ask, are you a distressed traveler? If so, here is a slice of my time. Tell me your story, and I'll tell you mine. Let's both take a deep breath, look up at the white contrails traced onto blue above. All is not lost. We have this moment, this shining now. There's a wonderful website that was started this year, and they posted 2 of my poems, and I'm going to read one of them. The title of the website is A Year of Being Here, and they post a daily mindfulness poem. And this is called Shavasana, the corpse pose. On the bonsai green carpet, you stretch your frame out flat upon a blue yoga mat, and parallel, I lie down upon a purple one, both of us becoming still, our bodies sinking further into the floor with each slow, steady breath. It is night, and together we're letting go. Our old black lab mix, Molly, wanders in, licks your open palm, sniffs my hair, snuffles, settles by my head with labored breath. Soon, I know, we'll lose her. Someday, each other. This is practice. We're learning to dissolve, surrender to earth, release thighs, hips, neck, skull, all the bones. Pay attention only to the breath. Let it become a ribbon, the texture of fine silk. I was invited to come to the Rotary Club, and Kate Robertson, who's here in the audience, was invited as well to talk about her ebook, How to
Tips for earning tips.
Tips for earning tips. Tips for earning tips, how to serve meat mojitos in Minnesota nice. It's a great book. I encourage you to get it. It's an ebook. So Kate and I went, and it was just fascinating kind of subculture. And so this came out of it. Some of our professors are in this particular Rotary Club: Jerry Tolan, Doug Simon, Mike Rich. So this is Ode to the Men of the Sunrise Rotary Club, Marshall, Minnesota. Each Thursday, you rise, shower, arrive pre-dawn at the YMCA, pin your name tag to your shirt, and begin the brotherly banter. The jabs knowing but gentle, the rejoinders self-effacing, boys disguised in men's suits, ties, who run businesses in town, teach econ at the local campus, plan city parks, patrol our streets, repair our broken teeth. Here you slide dollar bills into the brass Happy Bucks box as payment to announce a newborn grandbaby or your foreign exchange student who kicked in the winning soccer goal. Men of the Sunrise Rotary, as your female guest, I sing of your high spirits, your capacity for laughter in spite of tales I know could jam a sad bucks box. Layoffs, divorce, death. I sing of your noble desire to pass the four-way test. Of the things you think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And men of the Sunrise Rotary, I sing of your everyday courage, the way you stride into the world, pledging allegiance to all that shines brightest. I'm going to finish with an essay called The Biker Code, which occurred here at Southwest. The Biker Code. Several years ago, when our daughter Elaine's boyfriend at the time needed to store his Harley-Davidson motorcycle over winter, he asked if we had space in our garage. Sure, just enough room in our narrow one-car garage to squeeze in a shiny chrome and turquoise Harley Sportster. Daniel lived in South Bend, Indiana, where he worked at the St. Peter Claver Catholic Worker House of Hospitality that served the homeless, not known for spacious storage facilities for staff vehicles. 2 days before Christmas, his father had died unexpectedly of a seizure at 53, and Daniel had inherited his dad's motorcycle, along with a passion for cruising the open road. Daniel and Elaine had flown to Boise for the funeral, but were returning to Indiana in a U-Haul truck, packed with selected treasures from his father's life: tools, Navy uniform, a model train collection, and a Harley. Traveling on I-80, their truck buffeted by high winds, they took a 5-hour detour northward to Marshall, Minnesota, the drop-off spot for the Harley. The looming question: how do you unload a heavy cycle from a U-Haul truck without a ramp? My husband Jim, a creative problem solver, had a possible solution. We'd drive 7 blocks to Southwest Minnesota State University, where we both taught, back up to the loading dock by the mailroom and behind the theater, flip the hinged metal flap on the dock to create a bridge into the truck, roll the cycle onto the dock, rev it up, and ride down the ramp. The college wasn't in session over Christmas break. Few people except for public safety officers and maintenance workers were on campus, and few deliveries were being made. The job would be a snap. All went according to plan, until Daniel rolled the cycle onto the dock and tried to start it. Nothing, nada, zip. The sun beamed down from a cloudless blue sky over the prairie, but the temperature hovered just above zero, colder with the wind chill, and probably much colder than the Sportster had ever experienced in Boise. One option: Daniel could walk the cycle to our home. But between dodging icy patches and dealing with the bitter cold, he'd be the lead actor in a cross between Survivor and The Great Race. We'd need to come up with Plan B. Shivering and laughing, we took photos of Daniel with his dad's cycle on the loading dock. This was all too crazed. Below zero temps with the wind chill factor, a frozen Harley, no way to get the bike to our garage. We had to share these pictures with our friend Jan Loft, who also taught at the college and was a seasoned Harley rider, making the annual trek with her husband Doug Pilgrim to Sturgis, South Dakota for the big rally. She would not believe the scenario. We had to document the moment. Just then, a door swung open onto the loading dock. Were we going to get busted for using state property unlawfully? There stood Jan, her expression incredulous. "What are you guys doing?" We explained our predicament through chattering teeth. When we questioned why she was on campus over break, she said she was doing a favor, returning overdue library books for a colleague traveling over the holidays. Then she hightailed it to the parking lot to get Doug, who was waiting for her in the pickup truck. Doug tried pushing the bike down a sloping sidewalk in an attempt to jump-start it, but failed to achieve liftoff. The crankcase oil was too viscous. Nothing was happening. Stumped, the six of us brainstormed. Why not take it inside and roll it into the theater department shop? Set up the hot lights to heat it up and thaw it out, Jan suggested. As chair of the department, Jan had the theater keys right in her pocket. Once inside the deserted campus building, we spotted another friend, Ray Oster, a theater professor who does set design. We shared our scheme and he jumped on board. Let's do it. In the Black Box Theater, Ray arranged a bank of 6 spotlights on the Harley, now the star of the show. We all hoped for a quick thaw and ignition. In the meantime, we gave Daniel an impromptu grand tour of the college, student center, sports facilities, courtyards, our offices, the Walt Whitman room, the hangout for English majors, the works. 2 hours later, we returned and Daniel rolled the bike into the hallway with all of us trailing him. When he turned the handle, we held our collective breath, but not for long. The cycle roared to life with that distinctive Harley-Davidson growl reverberating through the halls of academia. Daniel grinned boyishly, the same expression he and his father shared in a photo of the two of them he'd brought back from Boise. The maestro-like head of a music professor popped out from behind a closed office door, his eyebrows arched in wonder. A gray-bearded art professor strode onto the scene and began snapping pictures, then stopped to ask for the story. A maintenance worker wearing an SMSU sweatshirt rounded the corner, surveyed us, smiled, and shook his head. Other gawkers swelled the crowd. How often is a Harley revved to life in a college corridor? Rolling the bike out into the parking lot with his feet balancing the Sportster like training wheels, Daniel did a skittery dance on an icy patch. Once he got to the main road on campus, he put his feet on the pegs and peeled off, slicing the frigid air, the sole biker cruising East College Drive that bitter December day. We thanked Jan and Doug for going out of their way to help Daniel. Doug shrugged, said matter-of-factly, "Just following the code." "What do you mean?" I asked. "What code?" "The biker code," Doug replied. "Always help another biker in need until you've exhausted all possibilities." Not a bad code to live by. Jim and I have since renamed that stretch of the Fine Arts Building the Harley Hallway. Now after work hours, when we switch to walking shoes and stride briskly side by side through the SMSU's interconnected buildings, passing through the Harley Hallway, we still hear echoes of Daniel's shiny Sportster roaring back to life, the unlikely sound of resurrection. Thank you all very much. We do have time for questions if you guys don't have to rush off.
Vince, you wanted to ask questions.
But he didn't
I
have
just wondered
it.
if there'd be a quiz.
We did such a damn good job, nobody wants to. That is the Harley hallway, by the way. Now I forget her name, but the new custodian over there, I had to, what's her name?
Michelle.
Michelle, yeah, I make sure she knows, because she's always wearing Harley stuff. And I said, oh, how appropriate, you're cleaning the Harley hallway, so.
I got a question.
Sure.
I was just curious, how long it took you to write your novel, like how much time you kind of spend on doing that?
Well, I have 4 of them. The Marsko Saga's 4 novels. I have all 4 of them in, well, 1 is complete, and then I've got 3 drafts. So I've been working on them 18 years. A lot of fits and starts. I was chair of the department for 5 years. That is not conducive to writing. Marianne was in graduate school for 4 years, so I did summer school and overloads, and I milk that any chance I get. Oh, I work so hard to put you through it. What she got through without a loan, so. So yeah, it's, and it's part of the reason why this is my last full-time semester. I'm going to phased, which is a technical term for I'm going to teach reduced loads for 3 years and then retire fully. So I'm hoping to get them all up soon. I got, but yeah, it's a lot of work. Anybody that tells you fiction is not a lot of work is, yeah, any writing is not a lot of work. So, thank you.
Lots of notes and notebooks that he's kept. I mean, to create a world like that, it just kind of boggles my mind to create something that extensive.
Thank you. And I'm doing another series that I've started. I have the rough startings of 2 of the probably be 4 or 5 novels. And that was cool because I bought a kid's compass, where you did geometry with a compass. And I've been doing the features of planets because I've invented these planets. And everywhere I go, oh, that'll fit on that planet. Oh, that'll fit on that planet. So they won't lock me up. It's harmless. I hope. Anything else? Oh, come on. Somebody's got to have a question.
I just want to, when is the movie coming out?
Well, we had our Steven Spielberg moment. We were in the cities, and I was wearing a cap, and we were in a hotel elevator, and somebody got on the elevator and said, oh, Steven Spielberg, because he's gray beard, cap, and everything. And so I said, no, I'm actually a fiction writer. So, and he said he was going to buy the book. So anytime, I actually, my cousin is married to a Hollywood producer, and I'm going to send him a copy of the book when it comes out in print. And he's my age, maybe a little bit older, and I'm going to say, and he did Heroes, I remember a few years ago. It was a big Emmy. We saw him at the Emmy Awards and half of my cousin on TV. So I'm going to say, look, you probably don't want to do this, but there's got to be somebody young and hungry that's looking for, so I mean, that's the end of my connections with Hollywood. But yeah, I'll send it off, and it'd be a good movie. I mean, it's a good book. You're asking the wrong person for an honest appraisal of this. I think it's hot damn. So, but anytime. And yes, the opening will be at Marshall 6. I started it right down BA 224. So. Yeah.
Will you release it on other formats other than Kindle?
It's going to be in book, print format, and I'm going to do all of them like that. I did the Kindle for about a year. I was hoping it would kind of take off, and there's a lot of you out there that haven't bought the book. So Amazon has a print-on-demand format, and I'm working with them to get it put into print-on-demand. And it's labor-intensive, and it's the busiest time of the year with end of the semester. So, but I'm hoping to have book 2 done so that when I launch it, it's both print and Kindle. So if you have a Kindle and you want to buy it as a Kindle, if you wait until after the print on demand is released, the Kindle and the book will look identical. Right now, it's just a Kindle and it's not formatted as well as I would like. So it's my first time. So. But yeah, print copies will be available. Yeah.
I had a question. So you both write in different genres, and I was just curious, as writers, the ways in which those different genres, writing for them, inform each other, and the ways in which you kind of have to forget what it's like to write in one genre while you're writing.
Good question.
I'll let you answer that.
I think kind of Jim alluded to this, kind of the building block there is like with poetry, you want that sense of engaging the senses. And, you know, when I'm advising students, whatever, it's like, oh, I always ask, what's your genre you're interested in? Oh, fiction. Well, you're going to take poetry in our creative writing program because it's going to inform all of your writing. And Jim, you know, he says he's a fiction writer, but he writes pretty amazing poetry as well. So just knowing that you have to take that ability to engage the senses and to create, like he said, a three-dimensional character, not just two-dimensional cardboard characters. I try to do that as well, even though I'm not creating characters to his extent. The characters, hopefully, in my poetry, they're real flesh and blood people. They're not just stand-in cardboard stand-ups. So I think it's really back and forth, and it's kind of fun to nail each other and then, you know, kind of chafe against and resist that. I'm sure that maybe happens in your household too. It's like, and sometimes you can hear things better from another editor than your own spouse. You know, you put the thing on the refrigerator door and it's like, but you don't understand. No, but it's a fun back and forth. It's a fun back and forth, and I think also with the genres now, there's so much cross hybridization that, you know, poetry, and then you've got prose poems, and you've got fiction, but you've got flash fiction. So all these, you know, the basic building blocks of any good writing, they have to be present no matter what genre it is. But now I'll let you answer.
Oh, okay. Well, it's all about every word. And, you know, one of the disadvantages of writing on a computer is you just set up a file and you could write 500 pages, right? You know, in the old days with you remember that Platens and rolling, and you guys, some of you don't even know what a typewriter is. You know, there were limits. You had to draw a breath, if nothing else. And now there isn't. But on the other hand, when you edit, every word counts. And I tell my students, I don't think they believe me, but I wrote an 800-page, you know, that's not print, like the book will be less than 800 pages, but print out. And I think I used there is or there was once, and I couldn't get rid of it. I hate that. You know, there is just such a wasted, you know, like in a freshman essay, there is this, and there is that, and there is that. You know, and I just scratch it out, you know. So words, you know, words. And then I got some good advice from one of the editors that rejected me, one of the critical agents, what do you call them, literary agents. She said, read the whole thing out loud. And I thought, are you freaking out of your mind, lady? And I did. I have read the first two novels to myself, word for word out loud. And it's just like a poem or just like a drama. You're doing a screenplay or a play. You have to hear it. And I mean, fiction should flow. And, you know, it's something I'm positive Joseph Conrad didn't do, or Henry James. You know, they did not read that out loud. I'm positive of that. So.
I was just going to make a quick comment for those that are here today. Give Eric an opportunity to plug his Thursday noon event.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I actually forgot the room number. There are posters all around. Thursday, so I moved here actually from Southwest China, where my wife and I lived for 2 years. And one of the things that I love the most about China were the number of English language T-shirts that mostly black market, and you can tell they're black market. But I'm fascinated with them in many, many, many ways, and so I'll be talking Thursday at noon about how those T-shirts have sort of shaped the way I think about translation. I've done some book and translation before, so I don't remember the room number, but the posters are around, so the room number is on.
I think it's CH224. I'm not sure, but I think so.
I'm not very good at those details. I'll check at 11:45.
It's not the Harley hallway, we know that.
Yeah,
It's not
like
See-
11:45,
see-
you know which room I'm going to.
And also, just to be aware of the posters up, the 8th annual Fine Arts Celebration, there's lots of amazing
Oh, the
things.
play.
Elizabeth Blair is going to be giving a reading on, it's April 23rd at 2? 1 o'clock, April 23rd.
And the play.
And the play, The Heiress, we saw it this
Last
past
weekend.
weekend.
It's very
It's
good.
wonderful, very intense, very powerful, wonderful acting. So if you haven't seen the play yet, go to see that. But lots of music events too. Any other questions? Thank you again for coming. We
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope Paul